And your role players have been great. A guy like Mike Dana, what does somebody like that do for a defense?
You hit one of the best ones. If you'd have asked me to list those kind of guys, Chris, that would have been the first one I brought up. We rely so much on Mike. He plays inside, he plays outside. He's so reliable. We always talk about chemistry and being on the same page to make this thing click. And when we're doing that and everybody's owning their role, we can play pretty good defense.
I've been standing on the table about the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think it's the quarterback, and I think it's that defense that gives them a chance every week. And the defensive coordinator is none other than my old ball coach, Steve Spagnuolo. Coach Spags, what's the word? How you doing?
Oh, great, Chris. Love being around you. I'm glad I get a chance to visit. We don't get to do this too often.
I know, it's cool. It's cool. I appreciate you taking the time. It'll probably make you smile with this right off the bat, but this week, Christmas, you're going to be working on Christmas, which is nothing new, right?
Yeah.
But you're coaching against one of your old players, and you've already seen AP this year. I thought they've done a great job there, and you can tell the players believe in him and the whole thing. You've been an interim head coach.
Mm-hmm.
How hard is that, and what are the keys, and how impressed are you with your guy?
Well, I will tell you this, Chris. It's not an easy thing to fall into. I mean, we're all love getting head coaching opportunities, but in the middle of the season where you haven't had a chance to kind of lay your foundation, get your culture right, it is really tough. But I will say this, Chris, and I don't know if you know Antonio very well at all, but
I know him a little
he's
bit.
done a terrific job. And quite honestly, I would have expected nothing less. He's that kind of guy. I told his dad about 2-3 years ago, I think maybe when he went to the Raiders the first time, I said, we tried to get him here in Kansas City.
Really?
We begged for him to come to coach for us when we first got here, and then he stayed at Arizona State. But I thought in 5 years, once he got in the league, he'd eventually be a head coach. It happened a little bit sooner than I thought, but I'm proud of him, Chris, like I am all you guys that I've had the pleasure of working with. And I told him I would root for him for 2 games. All but 2 games.
All but 2 games.
We played one already, and the next one's coming up. I'm not rooting for him on this one.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it's got to be great to see him, and I wonder, like with your experience, what is the biggest challenge, like that people don't see when you have to take a job like that in the middle of the season?
When you take over, everybody initially wants to know, is looking to do things your way. How do you want it done? So I remember when we went through it in New York, and actually Antonio was with me when I took over as interim head coach of the New York Giants in 2017. And I remember he was very helpful, to be honest with you, Chris, and kind of a connection with the players. But one of the things we strive for was for clarity and simplicity. I mean, you had to be clear in who was in charge and who was running this and who was running that. And I talked with Antonio a little bit when he took over, and that's probably the biggest challenge. Make sure you get everybody on the same page, make it clear and concise, try to get everybody headed in the same direction. I think he's done a great job of that. And he brings the extra flavor, Chris, like you would bring. He's played the game. He knows the game. He can relate to the players, and I think you're seeing that on the field.
No question. I got to have a couple beers with him at Super Bowl when I was actually on the Rams.
It might not have been a couple, though. If you were with Antonio,
it was a few more than a couple. But that night, I was totally sold on the guy. It was me, Freddie, Justin Tuck, and Antonio Pierce, and those guys, as you know, are amazing. I would have loved to have all of them as my vets. But, this is a team, you talk about your Giants team, that had to go win some games on the road. Now, I know you guys are trying to close this season out and play at home and win one game at a time and all that stuff. Yeah. But the challenges of possibly doing that, you know those challenges. And for a defense, how do you explain to a group that maybe hasn't been on the road, if you have to go there, what does it take to take over a stadium in January?
Well, I mean, we faced. I know we played the Patriots this week, and everybody thinks they're down right now. But when you go into New England to play the Patriots, they're always tough. You played there. And one of the things we stressed in this particular game, I know you're asking about on the road in the playoffs, but every game right now to us is a playoff game. We can't afford to give one. I mean, the margin for error is like that. And one of the things I did say at halftime, Chris, in this particular game was, listen, don't expect anything to be easy.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter who you play in this league, and we got to if we want to get to where we want to go, we better start ramping it up and recognize that and treat every game as if it is a playoff game. We have really good veteran leadership here, Chris, and we have guys that are on defense specifically that are into football. They're passionate about it. They prepare really, really well. I got a great group of guys that prepare really well. And when they take that into the game, I think that's what gives you an edge, whether you're home or away. We're fortunate here in the next couple of weeks where we'll be here at Arrowhead. But somewhere along the way here, we're going away to play our last game, and who knows, we might have to do it in the playoffs. But I think the veteran leadership is what's got to step up in those particular situations.
And your role players have been great. And I don't even like using that word because, it can sound like you're diminishing their role. But like a guy like Mike Dana, I think he's really important to you guys. I mean, for example, a Mike Dana, what does somebody like that do for a defense? And we're not talking about the quote-unquote stars, but guys like that.
Yeah, you hit one of the best ones. If you'd have asked me to list those kind of guys, Chris, that would have been the first one I brought up. We rely so much on Mike. He plays inside, he plays outside. He's so reliable. We put a defense in. We know one guy that's going to know it inside and out. It's going to do exactly what you asked for. It's going to be Mike Dana. But we have other guys like that. Leo Chanel is a linebacker for us that plays. We'll put him at defensive end. We'll put him on the edge. He'll play inside at linebacker and stack. Drew Tranquil has been a godsend.
Yeah.
I mean, if you followed us, Chris, when Nick got banged up, to have Drew Tranquil to go in there and do what he did at Mike linebacker was huge. But you're going to need your stars to show up in those games. You've been in a lot of playoff games, Chris. You know that. And then you need what you're calling these foundational players to play solid like they can play and even up their game a little bit more. I mean, all 11, we always talk about chemistry and being on the same page to make this thing click. And when we're doing that and everybody's owning their role, we can play pretty good defense.
Chris is so important, obviously, to your defense. And I know, he's not 15 sacks this year, but he had 13 pressures Sunday. And if you watch the tape, you know how important Chris Jones is. But, the contract situation's water under the bridge. It's so good he's there. But, for 10 days or a month, do you have two plans for how you want to run your defense? You know what I mean?
You mean going forward?
Yeah, if he wasn't going to be with you guys this year, which I thought was not going to happen, I thought he was going to be back in the building. But is there any part of you that's like, hey, there's two ways we got to go with the way I call this defense?
Well, there was when we didn't have him in that first game. But what he brings, Chris, and you're right about, he may not have the stats that he had last year, but I'm sure you watch the tape and see how much attention is paid to him. And that has opened up things for other guys. You bring up Mike and George and, Charles when he's in there. And so when you have a player like that and he demands attention, whether it's two or three guys that they commit to him, or the center's always going to turn that way, that helps us in things that we can do to try to expose the protection. And, he makes us a better defense because, just like because of the pressures he gets. It may not finish off in a stat with a sack, but people certainly recognize when he's there, and hopefully that can open up some things for some other guys.
Yeah, he's like that tight end you got on offense. Even when Kelsey's not making plays, he's making plays. That first shot the other day, they got two flat defenders basically, and I think it has a lot to do with Travis. So,
you're right,
and Chris,
about that
happens for Chris too. So one thing that I think is really interesting to me on a macro level with defenses in the NFL right now and offenses is, you guys had a big red zone stand early in that game, where it's a short field, it's a ball game, and you guys forced them to kick, I believe, and in that situation, I know you pride yourself on situational football, but when you look across the league, offenses are having a hard time in red zone this year, and I kind of wonder what you attribute that to, having nothing to do with your team, but just general football trends. Is it the lack of quarterbacks that are healthy, or is it the fact that people aren't paying as much attention to it?
You bring up a good point. I did not realize that it had been a struggle for offenses because I'll be honest with you, Chris, we haven't played particularly well in the red zone defensively, which is kind of a thorn in our side. And I'm glad you brought up the one that we stopped because
that was great.
All I can think about is the one that we didn't, Chris, because they had another turnover and they ended up scoring on it. But I don't know that I got a good answer for you on why the trend might be that way. But as you know, in this league, the one thing about whether it's offense or defense, if offense has got something that's clicking in a particular year in the red zone, defensive coaches, players figure it out at some point
Right.
and get caught up. And that might be what's happening there. And then, there'll be a cycle here where the offenses will come up with something else and they'll be more effective in the red zone. But I sure wish, I don't know what the rest of the league's doing. I sure wish we played red zone a little bit better. And if we're going to try to do what we want to do going down the stretch here, that's one of the places we got to get better defensively.
So, and maybe I know some of this stuff, but if you're looking for guys that you need to play well in the red zone, what do you look for in a red zone defense? What are the things that a red zone defense does great? I know the space is constricted, but for me, a grunt up front who I just knew don't run past the quarterback or I'm going to get yelled at, it's a lot more complicated for everybody behind me. So what is the right profile for a good red zone player, and why is it so different than the field?
Yeah, well, like you said, that the whole thing's constricted. To me, it does begin. You can't, first of all, can't allow our offense to run the football. So we begin there. Now, when you commit to taking that away, I think the pressure now goes outside to the corners on whoever they're covering. And so that's why you're going to see teams that if you have really confidence in those corners, you're probably going to be in more of a single high shell man free 3D defense. If you don't feel comfortable about them, you're probably going to be in more quarters and too high. Now that weakens your run front a little bit. So it's always the game, I think, for us, at least from my standpoint. What do you want to defend on this particular down, the run or the pass? Do you want to be in quarters and be a little bit weaker in the run and try to hit it with guys playing two gap? Or do you want to commit to an 8-man front and then put a little bit of pressure on the corners? And, we have a little bit of both, and we determine what we're going to do, Chris, based on who we're playing and what the threats are. But you face these teams with really good wideouts that can go up and catch the ball, and a running back and an offensive line they can run it. That can be challenging. That's where people, I think, are really tough to defend.
You mentioned corners. You have two really, really, really good corners, and one of them I think is probably, and you probably agree with me, one of the most underrated guys in the league in Snead.
Absolutely.
I think the wherewithal and the mentality to line up, and especially as aggressive as you are, to match up with. You put pressure on this guy, but he steps up every week, and he's got their best guy, and he hadn't been to a Pro Bowl. I don't know if he goes this year. Doesn't matter. I think he's up there. And, what can you say about him and that mentality every week of guarding their best guy?
Well, he's a Pro Bowl player to me, Chris.
Yeah.
And if there's others that are out there that are better than him, I'd have to see it. I'm not studying defenses this time of the year. I do that in the off season. But we think the world of LJ. I mean, when you take a guy and put him on the best receiver every week, that tells you how we feel about him.
Yeah.
And I think if you go back, I don't churn through these stats, but I know that most of the time we've played an elite receiver, he's kind of kept them in check. And that helps us defensively. There isn't anything he can't do, Chris. I mean, he could be playing nickel and be blitzing every down and be making plays that way, but he's on the outside now because of some of the wide receivers that we see, and we commit him to helping us take that guy away. I tell you what, Chris, the other thing, you don't see a lot of corners in this league that cover like LJ and play the run and tackle like he does. He had some outstanding tackles this past weekend up in New England. He had seven solos and 2 assisted tackles, and so he didn't have an interception and whatnot. But to me, those things go unrecognized, and you need guys like that to play good defense.
Us D linemen see it. I'm like, man, it'd be nice to have a run force guy like that behind you. But when it comes to McDuffie, you send this guy more than anybody in the league now. And there's a skill I know that it's not just, hey, run towards the quarterback. You guys disguise and the whole thing. But I think as it relates to a corner, becoming a pass rusher, that's not something that happens on accident. And I know you guys probably work things to prepare for these situations. How do you get a corner to become a pass rusher in those situations?
Yeah, that begins all the way back in training camp, Chris, to be honest with you. There are a lot of individual periods where because I don't have an individual group, but I do like taking DBs working on pass rush, blitz technique, coming off an edge and taking care of a boot, or going down the line of scrimmage, the heel line, and tackling it for a running play for a loss. But Trent really embraced that particular position. Look, we would not have been able to move LJ outside had we not had a guy that we felt comfortable inside, because the nickel is really important in today's football. You know that. You see it.
Yeah.
All these 3 wide out offensive skill guys that they put out there. And Trent is one of those guys he can cover. He's another guy that will support on the run. And because he does have a burst and can accelerate, he's a real good blitzer for us. I love bringing him. He loves coming. You know these guys.
I can tell
you know
he
these
does.
guys. Every D lineman wants to be able to cover man-to-man, and every DB wants to be able to rush the passer, right?
Hey, I don't know if you remember this about me. I was like, hey, no fire zones for me. I don't like being out there. So maybe I'm your
You wanted to go forward,
I
right?
wanted to go forward.
You always wanted to go forward.
Spags, you know, you've faced Josh Allen. You've spoken highly of Joe Burrow before, and I agree with you. He is the closest thing to Tom Brady that I'd seen.
I agree.
As a young player until I saw C.J. Stroud. Okay, he's pretty good.
I haven't seen him this year. Is that right? Yeah, I hear
he's
a lot.
pretty
of good
damn.
things.
He's got that, like, you know, he's
Yeah.
got the pocket awareness, keeps his eyes downfield. Every movement's efficient. You know, all the reasons that I'm sure you think Joe is like Tom. But I've heard you say, because you faced Tom and you're one of the only guys that have been 500 against Tom. That's a hell of an accomplishment. You don't want him reading your mail. So there's that pre-snap conversation in your building leading up to the game. But then there's the Josh Allen where it's like, you know, when we get there and I save my best call for the third quarter and he just obliterates my free runner, like, who would you rather see? The guy that can pick you apart or the guy that can ruin it all in one play?
Neither. I tell you what, he's Houdini, Chris.
He's amazing.
I told him that after the game. I mean, we threw everything but the kitchen sink and actually we got the free runners, but he finds a way. He's strong. He's the ultimate competitor.
Yeah.
And it's never say die. He's all the way over on the sideline there, and he gets that pass off. But
It was insane.
he's tough. Listen, whether it's cerebral and, you know, sit in the pocket like Tom did and able to get it out or extend it down like Josh does, they're both of those guys in their own way make it really, really difficult. And they're both of them. Listen, I love going against them because we all like to compete,
challenge.
right? But thank God Tom's gone. We don't have to deal with him
Get him
anymore.
out of here. He ruined all the rules for defensive players. Now he's gone.
Sure did. He sure did.
And we got to deal with the yellow flags. So
yeah, no, we'll blame it on him, right?
Yeah, with Nick Bolton, man, I knew when he was out that was going to be a big thing. I think he's another guy who's super underrated and like the heartbeat. When I look at him and Willie inside, what was the thing you learned about y'all's selves in his absence? And when he came back, what was the thing that you were like, it's nice to have Nick Bolton on the field?
Well, the one thing we found out with Nick gone was how good Drew was.
Yeah, he played really well.
I really felt like, Chris, if I look back at the 6 or 7 games that we lost Nick, we really didn't scale anything back. You know, and we're very multiple, and we put a lot on our guys from the standpoint of intelligence. And Drew, he just ran with it, man. And he was new to the system this year. It wasn't like he's been in it for the past few years. So I credit him with keeping that part of it together. Getting Nick back just feels so much more. He's just so natural with the guys and connecting all the dots, connects the front with the secondary and the whole linebacker crew. And he's one of those leaders that's got great instincts for the game. He'll be over on the sideline, Chris, in between series saying, he's doing this, I think we should do that. And I'll roll with whatever he wants to do because he's got a really, really good feel for the game.
You got to really trust that guy.
You're right. He's very underrated myself,
in
my opinion.
That's awesome. And you know, you bring up something with adjustments that I've been dying to ask you. It has nothing to do with this year, nothing to do with an opponent, but it's an older question. I've always wondered what goes on at halftime for you coaches. Is it like a fire drill where you're like, you know, you've been making the adjustments the whole first half, but an example of that would be you got to tell me what you did when you played Houston a couple years ago because they're going nuts. Yeah, they're going nuts, and then the second half, you guys come out and blank them. So, in general, what are you doing? What did you do in that game? Since it's all water under the bridge.
Yeah, it's been a while. I don't know that I can remember exactly what we did. I will tell you this, Chris. That like you said, it's ongoing all the time. Even though people think it's halftime adjustments, there's, it might get to the end of the middle of the second quarter, and I know we've done this a lot. We'll be on the headset saying. I'll be saying, in this case, it's Donald who works for us as an assistant. Donald, write this down. We need to convey that to the guys at halftime. Or, hey, circle this call. I'm going to want to use that in the third quarter. I always have somebody let me know at halftime, Chris, which blitzes we have not run. In other words, which ones have they not seen? Which ones did we already show them? So there's always that kind of chess piece going on. And listen, one of the things about any kind of halftime adjustment is really how the players will embrace and receive whatever you're telling them. And it could be as simple as, hey, look, guys, I mean, you played in New England, Chris. How many times did Coach Belichick walk in there and say, hey, guys, just do your job?
Yeah.
Right?
Don't get reached. I mean, it's something simple. It doesn't have to be some rocket science.
Exactly. Sometimes it's not a rocket scientist adjustment. It's just everybody deciding, okay, look, it didn't, as players, we didn't do it the way we were supposed to in the first half. Let's all do it the way we worked on it all week long. And then lo and behold, it works out a lot.
We had the right game plan all along. We just have to execute.
You just had to execute a little bit. And that, sometimes it's just as simple as that, Chris. You know it as a player, and I think every coach knows that too. So, but every once in a while we get a good idea, and we'll go in and throw something at halftime. And if the players execute and it works out, we all feel like, we did something really good.
Last question for you, Spags. You get a really special opportunity. I can tell you take it seriously going to New England. And with everything swirling around Bill, I'm not going to read the tea leaves because I don't care. It's just it's special to get the coach opposite Bill. And especially when he's his best because he's like, I want to take Travis Kelce away. I want to beat Patrick Mahomes. It's me and Andy, who I respect, but we're two of the greatest. How cool is it to coach against Bill, and what made him so great and what makes him so great, from a defensive mind standpoint?
Yeah, listen, it was double special for me, Chris. Look, I grew up a Patriots fan. I mean, I grew up in that area, and when they didn't win. Yeah. And then, I get in the NFL, and they start to win because Coach Belichick gets there, and now I find myself in Super Bowls against them. So it was kind of flipped. But I think we'll all be, years from now, we'll all be talking and bragging about how fortunate we were to have coached against and during the time of Bill Belichick. Yeah. He's legendary, in my opinion, not only as a head coach and leader, but defensively, of what he does in taking away what the offense does best. We all know that. He's made a career in stopping people by taking away their best players, and then trying to put together a defense that defends people week in and week out, year in and year out. Always really good. Chris, I think Jim Johnson and Coach Belichick, both, we learned this from. I mean, I'm always talking about stopping the run, but if you really study them, it's more about defending the pass in this league. And if some stats get out of there run wise, nobody panics about it, because when it's all said and done, it's about points allowed. It's not about total yardage And I think Coach Belichick understands that, and he plays the situational game better than anybody. Yeah, as a head coach and as a coordinator, and I got the utmost respect for him. And I'm really happy that you had the opportunity, Chris, to play for him. Yeah,
it was cool. But he'll let you think as a coordinator that you're doing something where he's letting you do exactly what he wants to let you do. Yeah, whether it's the run game or feeding some guy that's got 10 targets, it's like, fine. I just don't want the other guy to beat me. So
that's right.
But it was a special year, man, and I've had some great coaches. One of them, Coach Spags, and thanks, I just appreciate the time. I know you're in the middle of a big run. I'm rooting for you guys.
I appreciate it, Chris. Always great to talk to you, and make sure you tell the whole family I was asking for them. I appreciate all the work you did for us when we were together. I really do.
Thanks, man. You too. Okay.
See you, buddy.
I'll talk to you soon. Hey, tell Flage I said what's up.
I will. You still got the tattoo?
Oh yeah, man. Hold on. Have you seen it before?
Oh yeah, the Flage is good. I love it. I talk about that. I talk about it all the time.
Oh, Flage is on the other side.
On the other side.
I forget where Flage is.
There's his mug. Yeah.
So yeah, you get to.
That's an all-time great story, Chris.
Yeah,
I love that.
When the fucking guy walked up to my wife at training camp, Spags, and he goes, it's nice to finally meet you. And she goes, I wake up next to you every morning. So
that's an all-time great story. I'm going to go tell him right now, buddy.
Tell him I said hi, all right? I'll see you.
Great to see you.
All
love
right,
you,
Coach.
man.